Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our town hall. Workers strike back to stop Wall Street looting. My name is Charles Kahn. I'm the organizing director at the Strong Economy for All Coalition. It's a coalition of labor unions and community groups in New York. And I also work at the Center for Popular Democracy, managing Wall Street and corporate accountability campaigns. Typically, you would find me in DC at the Capitol or in a state capitol or maybe in the streets causing a ruckus. But today I'll be joining you as your moderator. And we'll be joined by kind of a beautiful cast of comrades from around the country. And to a stranger, this may seem like a random group, but we actually share quite a few things in common. That the most important thing being that our lives, our communities, and our workplaces have all been affected by Wall Street greed. And I imagine many of you that are joining have also been impacted. And so, Wall Street firms like KKR, BC Partners, Apollo Global, the risk really goes on, have rigged the rules to line their own pockets with absolutely no cares in the world about what the actions that they do, what kind of harm that causes to people, and what their predatory practices do to the employees at the companies that they work at, or even the investors that are leaning on them to invest their money. And on top of all of those things I've already mentioned, what we find is during the COVID-19 crisis, when millions of people were laid off, when millions of people were dying, that Wall Street didn't take any time off, and that they leaned in and they became more active and took more advantage during the economic distress that the pandemic caused to earn record-breaking profits on the back of the pain, the suffering that people were going through. What I always say is that, when the world is on fire, Wall Street makes s'mores, right? And so today, we're joining not just because of our adversity, but also because what really unites us is our drive to change the status quo. We're organizing, we're educating, we're fighting back to stop Wall Street executives and really to save the livelihoods and the lives of the people that we care about, the people that we love in our communities. And so we're fed up of the rigged rules and we're here to change it. We've done it before. It seems like a really tall task, but we've done it before. We won historic financial assistance fund for Toys R Us employees. We'll be joined by some of those employees and some of those champions later today. And we're doing it right now at PetSmart with our campaign to better their working conditions. We're doing it at Warrior Met Coal Workers campaign for better pay and benefits, and at HuffCore, a manufacturing workers campaign to protect their jobs and offshoring. And that's just a small piece, because in fact, tens of thousands of workers across the country, from Tennessee to Alabama to Illinois, are on strike and are fighting for better wages and working conditions on the job. And so what we're really fighting for is in many ways kind of the soul of this country and the direction of our economy. Is our economy going to continue to benefit only those that can afford to rig the game? Or will we be put in a position where working people finally have a chance to get ahead, finally have a chance to build and grow their families? And so today we'll hear from workers engaged in the fight, and we'll also hear from economic experts so that we can learn a little bit and know the issue a little bit better. And hopefully at the end of this call, we'll be able to lobby and advocate a little bit better with our elected officials in Congress. And so first off, a senator that in many ways needs no introduction, a people's champ. And we're going to hear from Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's the main co-sponsor of the legislation that we're talking about today, the Stop Wall Street Looting Act. And then we're going to hear from Representative Mark Pocan, who's also shepherding this bill in the House to make sure that it's passed and that we're winning real wins for working people. And so now I'll introduce Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Hello, AFR and United for Respect. I am deeply grateful for your commitment to advancing the Stop Wall Street Looting Act and leveling the playing field for workers, consumers, and communities. You've been leading this fight from the start, and I'm grateful for all your help and support in getting this legislation together. For years, private equity firms have been gutting companies and killing jobs, and this has only been magnified in the COVID-19 crisis. We've seen it in industry after industry that it's bad news when private equity comes knocking. It's bad for workers and consumers when local retailers or even large chains are bought out by private equity firms. These firms load up the target companies with debt, they strip out the assets, and the next thing you know, thousands of workers have lost their jobs and the stores are shut down. It's bad for seniors and their families when private equity buys up nursing homes or other healthcare providers. It's the same pattern. Assets are stripped out, cost cutting runs rampant with real consequences for people's health and lives. It's bad for students when private equity firms buy up for-profit colleges. Look, this is an industry that has a bad record of ripping off students already, and private equity just makes it worse. It's bad for communities when private equity firms buy up thousands of manufactured homes or the land that they sit on. Costs skyrocket, forcing residents to choose between paying the rent and paying for basic necessities like food and medicine, while investments in those communities decline and conditions get worse and worse. Across the board, we see the same pattern. Private equity executives make off with massive short-term gains, and they leave workers, consumers, and communities with nothing to show for it. But we're fighting back. With your help, we've reintroduced the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, groundbreaking legislation to clean up the industry. Legislation that aims to make the entire industry more transparent and to end misaligned incentives that create private equity's heads I win, tails you lose business model. There is not a person in the United States Senate who does not represent people who have lost jobs, pensions, or even loved ones because of private equity. And the more people who know about your work, the more support it will gain in Washington. The private equity lobby is one of the best resourced and most influential on the Hill. So the work you're doing to tell the truth about private equity industry couldn't be more important. Our work is not done. Thank you for all you've done to get us to this point. The work to level the playing field is hard, but real change is always hard, and this fight is worth it. I am so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight. Let's get it done. Done.
Thank you, Senator Warren. You've been at the forefront of this fight to bring the worst Wall Street behavior to the light, and you've stood alongside workers and the people that really have the most on the line. And so we really want to thank you for that. The Stop Wall Street Looting Act wouldn't be possible without legislative champions like you in the Senate. And we know that you are one of the strongest, best representations of what the Senate can be. And so up next, we have another champion and co-sponsor of the bill, Representative Pocan. He also has some remarks that he'd like to share with us today. And we're so lucky to have him on our side. Always ready to stand in solidarity when workers are on strike, Representative Pocan has been a dogged advocate for workers' rights for decades. From standing shoulder to shoulder with Huffcore workers in their fight against offshoring, to his constant work in New Jersey, just fighting for the residents of his state. And so up next we have Representative Mark Pocan.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Mark Pocan from Wisconsin's 2nd Congressional District, and I'd like to thank AFR and United for Respect for hosting this very important town hall on the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, a bill that'll take meaningful steps to stop the abusive practices of private equity firms in our country. I want to thank Senator Elizabeth Warren for her leadership on this issue, as well as my good friend Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, and Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal for their leadership on this as well. And I want to thank all the workers who are here today to talk about how harmful these predatory practices have been on them and on their communities as you have these private equity firms come in and create the havoc that they create. For too long, we've had these firms taking advantage of a rigged tax system and making out like bandits while these families are left struggling with what's left behind. And I think it's really immoral that these firms, many of them that come in and take companies that are mainstays in local communities, and they load them up with debt, they charge them exorbitant fees, and then they send them into bankruptcy, and they leave the workers empty-handed. When private equity firms win, pretty much everyone else loses. We had this happen in Wisconsin on a number of fronts, but one in particular was when Sun Capital bought out Shopko, a retail business that had been in Wisconsin for over 50 years. They supported hundreds of good-paying jobs throughout the state, and they gave working families that opportunity to earn a good, fair wage. As a matter of fact, my first job I had in high school was at Shopko in Kenosha, Wisconsin. After many employees spent years, often decades, working for Shopko, they were abruptly left out in the cold after Sun Country drove the company into financial ruin and later liquidated it. It's this practice, skipping town, skipping the company, and then moving on to the next company that they're about to destroy and profitize from, that's really at the center of why we have the Stop Wall Street Looting Act and why we need to hold these private equity firms accountable for the very actions they take. So I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this town hall and thank the organizations who are sponsoring this and the workers, again, who are here. And I look forward to working with you on this important legislation in the days ahead.
Thank you, Representative Pocan. And I misspoke before I said New Jersey, I meant Wisconsin. And for far too long, wealthy Wall Street executives have rigged the rules in their favor. Their greed didn't stop during COVID-19, but we're really, really happy to have champions like you on our side when our families and our communities really need the support most. And so up next, we're gonna jump in to hear from the experts and workers more about the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, what we're fighting against, and really importantly, what we're fighting for. And so to help us understand private equity's playbook just a little bit more, I'm gonna turn the mic over to my friend, Ricardo Valdez. Ricardo is the private equity campaigns manager at Americans for Financial Reform. And he's going to provide us with a little bit of insight on how worker exploitation is a core part of private equity's business model and something we have to stop if working people are going to be able to get ahead in this country.
Thank you, Charles. I want to touch on two concepts that are core to how private equity operates. And the first one is debt. Senator Warren mentioned that private equity firms load on debt to companies they purchase. This is a way that private equity executives can put people's jobs at risk and only use a small amount of their own money. Now, it's this type of financial engineering that allows the private equity firms to come in, really risk other people's money, make themselves very rich, and it's really the rest of us that pay the price. Now, normal folks like you and I, we don't have access to those kinds of financial tools, right? If we want to go buy a car or we want to go buy a house, we have to go into debt, and we're responsible for that debt. The private equity firms aren't responsible for that debt in the way the current laws are. Right now, they can go and load the debt onto the companies they buy, as I've said. And that really shifts the risk off of themselves onto the companies, the customers, and all the other stakeholders, and the communities that those companies are in. One thing I want to touch on is that private equity owns companies in virtually every sector of the economy. And that includes single-family homes and rental housing, hospitals and nursing homes, retail and entertainment, manufacturing and logistics, and oil, gas, and mining. But wherever private equity goes, the result is the same. The debt-driven deals and extractive financial engineering devastate communities that are left behind. And private equity looting isn't the result of just a few bad apples. We've seen the same pattern of exploitation again and again. When private equity buys a business and squeeze every last penny, they do so without regards to the workers who make the company run, the consumers, renters, and patients the companies serve, and the communities those companies reside in. Simply put, as the way current laws are, exploitation is baked into the private equity business model. And private equity is huge. Many people don't realize that private equity owns over 8,000 companies in the US, and that translates to them controlling around 9 million jobs. And as others have mentioned, while most of us have been struggling during the pandemic, business for private equity is booming, with some private equity executives adding tens of billions of dollars to their net worth during the pandemic alone. And as you'll hear from the other panelists today, more and more of us are saying enough is enough. Workers and communities are fighting back. Workers are fighting to keep their jobs and for better pay and working conditions. Tenants are fighting rent hikes, evictions, and poor living conditions. And all of us together are fighting to demand that Congress change the rules that allow private equity abuses by passing laws like the Stop Wall Street Looting Act. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricardo. I hate to say I'm not surprised at what you've shared. I know I'm heavily involved in this work, but I really just want to thank you for joining us. It's the conversations like these and people becoming informed about what's happening around them that makes us better prepared to be able to fight back and organize and hold private equity firms accountable. So thank you. And to those of you that are joining this town hall, I bet you're starting to think what can I do to fight back? What can I do to organize? And there's a way you could join the fight to protect your job, to protect your family, and to protect your neighborhoods. At the end of this town hall, you can visit the page down below. You'll see it right there. It says bit.ly/SWISLA-action. And by doing that, you'll be able to call or email your member of Congress and make your voice heard. It's a really, really important action that will help Congress members to know that this is something that they have to deliver on for the American people. And so, workers are organizing to hold Wall Street accountable, and they're winning. right? That's part of why we put this rally together, this call together. And Sarah Woodhams is someone who's organized and helped win historic financial assistance funds for Toys R Us employees. And Isabella Burrows is organizing with her coworkers now at PetSmart to improve the working conditions that have continued to deteriorate since private equity bought the company. Both are advocating for the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, and both of them are here with us today. And so since private equity firms BC Partners acquired ownership of PetSmart in 2015, they've basically done everything except provide the PetSmart workers with safe working conditions and benefits, or provide those workers with the tools they need to provide quality care for the pets. Isabella Burrows is a PetSmart employee who, with her coworkers, is organizing with United for Respect and recently launched a campaign to highlight deteriorating working conditions and negligent management at this country's largest pet retailer. I'm a pet owner myself. My dog is probably somewhere in my house chewing up a slipper at the moment. So I'm very much invested in this fight as a pet owner. And so fueled by her passion, Isabella has been fighting to ensure that BC Partners puts people and pets over profits. In the fight to hold these private equity firms accountable and pass the Wall Street Looting Act, on the other side is Sarah Woodhams, a former Toys R Us employee who has organized with United for Respect. If there's one thing that Sarah can attest to, it's people power. I first met Sarah in the streets. We protest and we work together. And when private equity firms bankrupted Toys R Us, they thought they would just walk all over Toys R Us workers. But Sarah and her colleagues and her coworkers had something else in mind. And what they did is, instead of being kicked to the curb, they won severance pay. Private equity was wrong, right? And it was a historic win, $20 million in financial assistance for Toys R Us from their private equity owners, KKR and Bain Capital. That's real people power. That's what we're about. And that's what we're going to continue to be about until we win. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Sarah and Isabella, and they could share for themselves the work that they're doing and the big wins that we've had. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Woodhams, and I'm a former Babies R Us associate and a proud leader with United for Respect. Thank you all so much for joining us today to celebrate the reintroduction of a piece of legislation that's very close to my heart. I am proud to say that because of my coworkers and my efforts, we are one step closer to reining in private equity's predatory practices. We've made sure that the Stop Wall Street Looting Act puts people over profit. So when private equity firms looting costs workers their jobs, the workers' economic well-being is given priority to ensure workers are paid their hard-earned benefits like severance and pensions before wealthy, greedy Wall Street executives can line their pockets and run away from the companies that they've ruined. It's hard to believe that we don't currently have these protections in the wealthiest country in the world, but it's true. I worked at Babies R Us for 7 years until it closed. I loved the company. To me, it was more than just a job. I was a baby registry consultant and a supervisor in charge of running all the events, as well as the social media for our store. Toys R Us was a unique company. We had specialists who trained in all the departments, and I took a lot of pride in knowing that we were guiding people through the special milestone moments of their life. I know my coworkers felt the same way because many of them had been working there for over 20 years. When I found out that Toys R Us had declared bankruptcy, I was recovering from going into preterm labor. I had just lost my son and was left with a $1,500 ambulance bill. We were told that if we worked until closing the store, we would get our promised severance pay. So I did just that. I worked without a single day off. I dealt with angry customers and other liquidation groups to make sure I got paid. However, as we all know, that didn't happen. Wall Street executives, KKR, Bain, and the banks cashed in, and we, the workers, were left with nothing. I just gotten married, and when the store closed, I had just gotten married when the store closed, so we didn't really have anything in terms of savings. Unemployment in Philly that year was so overburdened, and the truth is, without my income or severance, we almost lost our house. If it hadn't been for the kindness of other parents in my kids' schools, we also wouldn't have had a Christmas dinner. This bankruptcy did a real number on my family and our community. But we didn't take this injustice sitting down. My coworkers and I organized and fought back, and I was proud to win a little bit of relief for some of the 33,000 employees who lost their jobs to Wall Street's greed. I know that when we come together and fight for what's right, we can win. We now have been joined in this fight by workers at Sears, Kmart, Payless, Gymboree, Art Van, PetSmart, and many others who lost their jobs as well. We have seen the toll it takes when Wall Street takes advantage of loopholes in the system and lack of regulations to harm people like us. Now it worries me that they've been further bailed out during this pandemic without any accountability to the communities they employ. Enough is enough. I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through. This is why I joined the fight with United for Respect, and I won't stop fighting until Wall Street is held accountable and we finally pass the Wall Street Looting Act. I want to share the mic now with Isabella. She is an employee at PetSmart who is seeing in real time the effects on private equity-owned companies and their workers.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabella Burrows, and I work at PetSmart in Howell, Michigan. I've been at PetSmart for a little bit over a year, working first as a cashier and now as a low-level manager. I started working there because I love animals. I have 8 pets of my own, and I love helping pet parents find solutions for their own. Unfortunately, BC Partners, the private equity firm that owns PetSmart, has not shown the same concern for PetSmart employees or the animals in our care. Time and time again, they have prioritized cutting costs wherever possible, which is very much in the playbook used by private equity companies, much like Toys R Us, Art Van Furniture, Payless, and others. It's us, the workers, and the pets who are paying the price. When the pandemic started, BC Partners cut positions and slashed hours despite the soaring demand for pet products. As a result, short staffing is a huge source of my stress at the store to this day. Important tasks in the pet care department just aren't getting done because there aren't enough associates. Personally, I feel overwhelmed and exhausted because I'm required to do 3 to 4 jobs at a time. Being an essential worker in the time of COVID-19 is already really hard, and it's even worse when BC Partners treats us as disposable and does not value our health and safety. Not only have they failed to enforce mask mandates and social distancing, but they've also neglected to fix the AC at times. When my coworkers come into work with a cough, I feel scared for my family's safety. I fear bringing COVID-19 home to my parents, especially since my mother is high risk. Sadly, many times my coworkers don't feel like they have a choice but to come in sick because it's very difficult for part-time associates to get paid time off. We recently published a report highlighting how under BC Partners ownership, incidents of pet death and neglect have increased significantly at PetSmart, while workers continue to struggle to provide quality pet care because of understaffing, stagnant wages, lack of supplies, and broken equipment. This is why it's so important to hold private equity accountable, and why I've joined my coworkers in taking a stand and demanding that BC Partners puts pet care over profits and that they treat their associates with dignity and respect. If you are an animal lover or anybody who supports essential workers in retail, join us in urging your member of Congress to support the Stop Wall Street Looting Act.
Thank you, Sarah and Isabella, for sharing your stories with us. Isabella, I don't have 8 pets, but I have 1. And whenever you need us, we're ready. But it's really an honor to be with both of you in this movement. And I know we've heard a little bit about how private equity has impacted workers in the retail industry, but private equity is also impacting the newspapers and the news that we get, and even housing. And private equity firms are buying properties up left and right and driving up rental costs and contributing to America's unaffordable housing shortage. If you're a believer of the rent is too damn high, then this is one of the fights that's for you. For so many workers and victims of private equity on the job, they're now realizing that Wall Street may be the new landlord. And what that means is higher costs for housing, lower quality for housing, right? And that's something that we need to fight against, because housing is something that everyone deserves. Housing is something that everyone needs. And to tell us a little bit more about this issue and how he's organizing the fight back is CASA Montgomery County lead organizer, Alex Vasquez. Alex has mobilized over 500 community members and established 3 tenant associations fighting for improved housing policies in all levels of government. Alex, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Alex, and I am the Montgomery County, Maryland lead organizer for CASA, one of the largest immigrant rights organizations in the Mid-Atlantic region. Aside from fighting multiple social justice issues at the local, state, and federal levels, one of the most significant issues that we are taking head on is housing inequalities caused by corporate greed. During the past few years, more and more acquisition companies have been purchasing buildings for the sole purpose of making a profit for their investors, but neglecting basic housing and human rights. Today, I want to highlight one of them, Arbor Realty Trust. Arbor Realty Trust holds ownership stakes in over 8,000 apartment units across the United States. It has a history of targeting apartment complexes in poor and minority areas to buy them before systematically neglecting essential maintenance of the buildings and grounds, trapping tenants in horrific conditions while increasing the rents annually and passing the profits to shareholders. In Maryland alone, they own several hundred multifamily units and buildings. For more than a decade, our organization and the tenants have been trying to speak to the owners and managers of this property to work together to improve the property conditions, and our pleas have continued to fall on deaf ears. Basic maintenance and necessary repairs to both properties and multiple properties have been ignored and neglected to the point that minority families living in them are forced to live in conditions that belie expected housing conditions in the region. After multiple attempts to work with them, tenants together with CASA filed a federal complaint for violating the Fair Housing Act. Currently, we organize in different communities across the state that violate housing conditions and discriminate against their tenants for the sole purpose of making a profit for their investors. For some of these big companies, tenants along with CASA are leading the charge in potential lawsuits. Due to the sensitivity of the cases, I will not name the big corporations, but one thing I can say is that you can see similarities between all these companies. Many take advantage of low-income, multifamily residential properties. Many present an unsafe, unsanitary environment where broken windows are routinely replaced with plywood. Holes from collapsing ceilings related to failed plumbing are ignored. Toxic mold grows without any attempt at remediation. Uncontrollable rodent populations infest entire buildings. Bed bugs, roaches, lack of heat and air conditioning, broken refrigerators and stoves, faulty wiring, and rusted bathroom radiators are ignored and fail to comply with housing standards and code inspections. The increasing rise of these Wall Street funded companies has led our organization to join a national housing coalition called Renters Rising in order to target these large corporations that have violated housing and human rights across this country. When these large-scale corporations are funded by Wall Street investors, they have a duty to maximize profits for their shareholders. But I am here to say that they have an obligation to provide safe and affordable housing for their tenants. The Stop Wall Street Looting Act would help rein in the greed of corporations like Arbor Realty. And that is why I'm here on the behalf of the CASA organization that works alongside thousands of tenants across the country to urge you to join our fight and support this bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And big shout out to you for the work you're doing in Maryland. Next time I'm in the DMV, you could count me in for a canvas shift. And so I also want to, send a big shout out to United Mine Workers of America, who are fighting back right now against Wall Street greed. But to tell us a little bit more about that story, I'm going to turn your attention to Cecil Roberts, the president of United Mine Workers of America, an organization whose members have been affected by Wall Street investment firms, particularly workers at Warrior Met Coal, who went on strike this summer over pay and benefit cuts. Cecil, go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me. Read the comments from everyone. This is 211 days of striking in Alabama. Let that sink in for a moment. And I want to say our workers have been so courageous in this struggle. This is the longest strike in the history of Alabama. We had the largest labor rally in Alabama's history on August the 4th. But this strike really didn't start 211 days ago. It started 5 years ago when Jim Walter's Resources filed for bankruptcy. And two words no one wants to hear, particularly if they're a union worker. This judge in Alabama said this company could be sold free and clear. Those are the two most frightening words in the dictionary to workers. So the first thing that happens, the judge terminated our collective bargaining agreement, terminated retiree health care. And then what happens next? Here comes Apollo, KK&R, and Blackstone, mainly Apollo, and bought this company free and clear. They came to us and said, you have no rights here to represent these workers. You have no rights to bargain for them at all. But if you want to have us employ them with our new company, which did not have a name at the time, these are the conditions. And those conditions were horrible. $6 an hour pay cuts, drastic changes in the healthcare, concessions that amounted to about $1 billion over 5 years. But then the next thing that happened, they placed themselves on the board of the new company named Warrior Met. And they took out about $1 billion in cash over the next few months because they were sitting on the board. Over the last 5 years, our members have worked in 2 mines that are owned by Warrior Met. You go straight down a shaft on an elevator for 2,000 feet, then you ride 3 miles underground or 4 miles. And these mines are some of the most dangerous mines in North America. Our workers have been treated poorly by this new company. They've been forced to work 11, 12-hour shifts. Their health care has been cut. Time off has been reduced. So when the contract expired on April the 1st, we went on strike. About 2 weeks later, there was a tentative agreement proposed by the company, which was voted down by 95%. The workers also understood that they were going to continue striking with that strike vote. So over the past 211 days, we have been to New York and Wall Street and taken the fight to BlackRock that owns the interest in this company. We're going back next week. So we're fighting on the picket lines. We're fighting in New York. We're fighting on Wall Street. And we understand full well the ramifications that come when these corporate raiders move in and take ownership out of bankruptcy. And they're not worried about anything or anybody but making money. And I'm so proud of our members standing up and fighting back. And I appreciate the opportunity to express their concerns and their understanding of what's going on around them. So the fight might be in Alabama on the picket lines, but it's a fight that goes all the way up to New York also. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for sharing, Cecil. I'm here in New York, and I'm with you in the fight. So it definitely goes all the way from Alabama up to New York. And as you've heard, these greedy Wall Street firms, they claim that they're making moves and deals that provide opportunity for our country, that make room for innovation. But really, what they're doing is making room for to grow their own wealth. right? And to flow the money that deserves to be in the pockets of workers into their own bank accounts, right? With no regard for the lives that they ruin. For them, it's just part of the game, right? But we're here to change the rules so it works for us. The members of Industrial Division of CWA, International Union of Electronic, Electrical, Salaried, Machine, and Furniture Workers, a mouthful, also known as IUE CWA, it's a lot shorter for the rest of us, know about this firsthand, this fight. They've been fighting to keep their manufacturing jobs from being relocated to Mexico. And to share more about that story, I'd like to pass the mic to the Government Affairs Director of the Communication Workers of America, Dan Maurer, to tell us a little bit more about how that fight is going. But before that, we're also going to see a video that we'd like to share with y'all from HuffCorp.
I think we started realizing what OpenGate was doing probably about a year and a half ago. They started laying off good workers to try to push out more work with less people. And they started having a lot of accidents. One girl got her leg broke. We lost one of our biggest customers for over 65 years. We wasn't getting parts like we supposed to, normally would do. Then when contract time came around, they said, well, we're kind of busy doing other things right now, so can we schedule this for next year? There we go. You know, next year came, boom. Oh, we closing the company. We ain't got no contract. Now they tell us, oh, we're gonna move the company to Mexico. If this stuff keeps going on, ain't gonna be no middle class.
Great. Thanks, Charles. And before I start, I want to just say what an honor it is to be here with such a great group of panelists who've done courageous and really tremendous work to fight for good jobs against Wall Street greed. And in particular, since we just heard from President Roberts, I just wanted to say, you know, the workers at Warrior Met Coal who've been fighting back for dignity, for respect, for decent jobs against BlackRock's greed have really been an inspiration to all of us. They've inspired, I think, a lot of the ability of workers to fight back recently that you've seen across the country. And so we stand with all of y'all in your fight, and we've got your we admire you, and we support you all the way. Again, my name's Dan Maurer. I work for the Communication Workers of America, and we represent workers who've just mostly just seen their jobs lost. And this is at a company called HuffCorp. It may not be a household name. Neither is OpenGate Capital, the company that just acquired them. But the thing about HuffCorp is that it's been around in Janesville, Wisconsin for the last 120 years, producing movable partitions, the kind of things you might see at any big event where they need to close off some space or give some privacy. It's a crucial thing for lots of uses. But unfortunately, 4 years ago, OpenGate Capital acquired the firm. And as you just saw in that video, things started to go south quickly. The company, OpenGate, started cutting jobs, trying to do more with less. And then more recently, what we saw late last year is that they started hiring temps instead of full-time workers who are union represented workers making more than $20 an hour in family supporting jobs. And so they're paying them less only for short term. And so all those things made us know that something was up, and that the company and that OpenGate was not going to respect the company and our workers. What ultimately happened was this: over the summer, OpenGate announced that they were going to close HuffCorp's plant in Janesville, Wisconsin, and move it to a facility right outside Maurer, Mexico, because they knew that at that facility they were going to be able to exploit our brothers and sisters down there who were not able to freely form a union and who were being underpaid, being paid less than $4 an hour. So that gives you an example of what they were doing. Now, the thing about this that I think is really important to know is two things. First, this is a company that had really no reason, like many others, that it should have been destroyed in this way. Huffcore had been a very successful company for a very long time. And when we saw the problems rising, our members came up with all sorts of reasons, all sorts of things to do. They picketed, they rallied, they came up with cost cut saving measures. They did everything that they possibly could to convince the company to stay. But OpenGate knew that they wanted those big short-term profits that they could get by underpaying our brothers and sisters in Mexico, who again, were not able to negotiate fair wages. And that's a lot of the same thing that's happened in many of the other stories you've heard today. Because OpenGate Capital, it's not like they're short of money. They've been making profits of between 18 and 37%. And yet, nonetheless, we see the same thing happening all across the country. As a matter of fact, this is the 5th different company that they've closed in the United States in the last 4 years. And they've actually closed three different companies just in the state of Wisconsin alone over the last decade. And they've closed other companies all across the country. And that really shows you what this business model is about. It's about making huge profits. I mean, 37%, think about that for a company. And they still are laying workers off left and right while leaving workers out of work and holding the bag. And that's just unacceptable. And I should say that just in closing, the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, we really need it now because this is a bill that's designed to fix exactly this problem. Because OpenGate, just like all the other firms you've been hearing about during this town hall, has been loading companies up with debt and then extracting profits every way they can by paying out big bonuses, by doing stock buybacks, and again, by moving jobs out of the country. And they should not be permitted to do that. And that's exactly what the Stop Wall Street Looting Act does. It says that if you're going to be a private equity firm and you're going to buy up companies, you can't just loot those companies, and it bans all those practices. And what that'll mean over the long term is that workers like those Huffcore workers in Janesville will be able to retain their jobs. And it means that workers at companies all across the country will be able to keep their jobs and be able to live with some dignity. So that's that. And Charles, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Dan. And to the members of IUECWA, we see you, we hear you, and we're fighting with you. And so we're coming to a close for today. And really after hearing everyone's remarks, there's a couple of ways that I'm feeling. I'm feeling really energized, a little bit angry, and really full of compassion for all of the other people across this country that are going through the same issues. And really proud, because in the face of adversity, instead of giving up, we're fighting back, right? We know that we have to fight back because behind those out of business signs, behind those medical bills, behind those rent bills, are families and friends who either lost their jobs or being crushed under the weight of Wall Street greed because a Wall Street executive or a Wall Street firm decided that getting rich, getting richer was the most important thing. But, the way we started the call, we're not here to talk about the problem. We're also here to talk about solutions. And that's why the Stop Wall Street Looting Act is so important. And here's just a couple of things that the Stop Wall Street Looting Act does that will completely change the way that our economy works and really put a leash on Wall Street to make sure that workers have a fighting chance, that workers live in communities and have the opportunity to thrive, not just to make it, not just to scrape by, but to thrive and to grow and to prosper. And so the Stop Wall Street Looting Act, first, it limits the amount of debt that a private equity company can load on to, a private equity firm can load onto a company. That's really, really important because one of the main reasons that private equity owned companies go out of business is because the private equity firm loads so much debt on them. They load on debt onto the company, they take the profits out, and they leave the company that they bought high and dry with loads of debt and workers with no jobs, right? So limiting the amount of debt that private equity firms can load onto companies is a really important first step. The Stop Wall Street Looting Act also holds private equity firms accountable for losses or liabilities, right? When a private equity firm runs a company out of business, they just walk away, right? Because right now the law is set up so that they're not liable for any of the destruction that they cause. And for the first time, this bill would make it possible to hold them accountable and to make sure that they're liable for the losses and the destruction that their predatory practices cause. Third, it changes bankruptcy laws to make sure that workers and other stakeholders get a piece of the pie, right? Bankruptcy is something that none of us want to see, but when we do see bankruptcy right now, workers and other stakeholders, they don't get anything, right? The banks take whatever is left. They pick whatever is left from the carcass, and workers don't get anything. So we want to make sure to change bankruptcy laws so that workers have a shot to get a little bit back, right? To get a little bit to keep, so that even though they're in this difficult situation, they just have a little bit of help to help them get by. Fourth, it closes tax loopholes that only privilege private equity and Wall Street execs, and really and those tax loopholes also encourage them to loot. So by doing that, we're going to make our tax system fairer, right? We're going to make our tax system better. And we're going to, maybe most importantly, we're going to have more resources to invest in the kind of programs like childcare, like affordable housing, like education that people really want and care about. But that's not all, right? This is like a combo deal, the deluxe special. The Stop Wall Street Looting Act also prevents private equity firms from raising money from investors by lying about their fees or how much in returns they're going to give to their investors. It also requires ownership disclosures for companies that receive federal money. Part of what happens actually with private equity owning companies, sometimes we don't know who owns it, right? They hide behind shell companies, and it makes it really difficult to find out who's responsible. And so we make sure to change that as well. And lastly, it's a very important bill for being able to track private equity ownership, particularly in healthcare, right? And so that's what the Stop Wall Street Looting Act does. That's why all of us are on this call today. That's why we're so fired up and energized to make sure that this bill passes. And we won't give up until we pass the act. We know it's time for justice. It's past time, right? Justice is late at the moment, right? And we know it's time to rein in Wall Street and private equity firms and protect our jobs, our homes, and our families. To those of you that tuned in to watch the live stream, thank you. This is the first step. And you can also take more action to protect your job and to protect your community and Wall Street greed. As I said, if you look below, you'll see the link, bit.ly/SWISLA-action, where you can find out more information. You'll be able to call your member of Congress or email your member of Congress to tell them to pass the Stop Wall Street Looting Act. It's really, really important to raise our voices. It's really important to make sure that our elected officials know what's important to us, know what we're fighting for, and know what they need to fight for in order to continue to be our elected official, to be honest. And so you'll be able to join us at our next lobby visit. Please visit the website. We'll make sure to send you a lobbying toolkit and give you all the training, all the educational material that you need to feel confident in talking to your elected officials and talking to your neighbors and talking to your friends about the importance of stopping Wall Street looting. There's also a social media toolkit for those of you that are on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or Snapchat. So you'll be able to spread the word and see more of these stories and amplify these stories. And also just kind of stay up to date on the fight and what's currently happening to protect us, to build families up, and to make sure our economy's changing so that it's working for working people. And the last thing that I want to take what you've learned today and share it with your family and friends. So again, please visit the website. Please share the information. The success that we've had up until this moment is because people like Cecil and Sarah and Isabella and Dan and Ricardo and the thousands of workers across the country have refused to stand down. No matter what people say, they know that all of us working together, shouting from the rooftops, organizing, being seen, taking up space is what it's going to take to stop Wall Street greed. We have to keep doing it. We have to make sure people know what's going on, and we have to move ourselves and move others into taking action. That's the solution. That is the engine that drives the car, that gets us to the destination that we want to get to. All right. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in the streets. I'll see you in the fight. Again, please visit the website and have a good day.